my stuff. So hi, I'm Colin. I'm a local entrepreneur. I'm co-founder of Always Cool Brands and founder of Always Cool AI. We make smoothies, cow milk, pie crust for other people's brands. You go to Sprouts and get our stuff under Sprouts banner right now, as well as a number of other products in the pipeline. We specialize in basically taking poison out of the food supply. We make foods that don't have any dyes or additives, stuff like that. Won't give you cancer, make your kids stupid. 3 years ago, I left an engineering leadership position at Oracle to be a focus on public good. This is part of it. So is Always Cool. So for me, I don't work for LangChain. I was an early LangChain user. I am a user, so we use LangGraph all across in 5 different ways, five different applications on the website. I have it in 2 different places on Ingress, my ERP system, and then having a number of other places with different scripts here and there. Also a community builder. Started this 2 years ago because I wanted to find nerds like me doing this stuff. I used to call myself a 10% developer. I then upgraded to 50% developer, and now call myself an 80% developer, thanks to everyone here, because you've been really cool and shared the knowledge. So kick it off. This is a really important thing for us as a community. Harrison and team, they've now started distributing training materials out to the community. So not only can you go onto LangChain Academy and take the courses, so if you go to academy.langchain.com, there's a bunch of quick start courses for those that are new, right? Highly recommend it. But they're also distributing out content like this. So we're going to talk a little bit about LangGraph right now. There's 3 things that you might hear about with LangChain: LangGraph, deep agents, right? LangGraph is we'll talk about it right now, but it's basically an underlying framework that allows you to run like LangChain, deep agents, other stuff inside of it. So we're going to talk about building AI systems. We're going to introduce LangGraph, and then we're going to show the ecosystem. So let's talk about building AI systems, right? So when you talk about like a simple interaction with the large language model, right? It's very limited, right? So you start, you talk to your LLM, you get to in. It lacks context, right? So good applications, they follow a control flow, right? So you might do step 1, step 2, step 3, a reason and act agent, right? Maybe a simple path, and earlier on, multiple years ago, LangChain was a chain of transformations that we would do with our inputs and outputs, right? So this control flow forms a chain, right? So when you think of like an example search or a RAG chain, the question goes and hits your vector store. That vector store, the retrieval from the vector store gets passed to the LLM, and then out comes the answer, right? So the agent is not really equal to control flow defined by the LLM, right? So you might have the start go to step 1. The LLM may choose it to go back to the start of step 1 and proceed to step 2, right? You might loop through things. So you've probably heard that an agent is kind of like a for loop, right? At the end of the day, right? So if you think of a chain of simple chains of synchronous execution or processing of a start, step 1, step 2, right? It's developer defined. An agent itself, you might have the LLM define that control flow, right? Simple. So if that agent's control flow is defined by that LLM, right? I think I actually went backwards. My bad. Let me go. Whoop. So agents themselves, they may use tool calling. So does anyone use tools with their agents right now? Okay, so about half the people, right? So if you think of it in this case, right, you have the natural language input, right? You have a tool, which may be it may be a calculator, it may be a Tably web search, it may be whatever, right? Those are bind together with the LM. The LM binds that tool maybe through an MCP, right? And then outputs the payload needed for that tool, right? The simplest design that we talked about for the loop is a React agent, so a reason and act, right? Where the process is started, the tools are called, right? And then the tool happens, the LM observes that response and then loops through to the end, right? The simplest example is like, I don't know, probably my Perplexity web search MCP, right? So thing about React agents, they're flexible, but they can go in any direction. You know, and I think later today when Collier's starting to talk about deep agents, we'll see the power of being able to really, really, really go any direction, right? It's not a bad thing, but there are some cases where you don't want it to. So I brought up an example of how, you know, I have 5 different applications on my web front end that we use for like label design, FDA validation, nutrition facts calculation, places where allergens, religious context, like halal, kosher stuff where like if you get it wrong, people can die, right? So in this case, do I want to put a React agent on there? Or do I want to put a directed acyclic graph? Do I want to actually constrain what it does? I want to constrain what it does, right? So we talked about, and the reason I want to constrain what it does is because reliability and repeatability are not something you're going to get, right? Because we know that anytime we query an LLM, they're non-deterministic. I might get the different thing out of it each time, right? And in things like life safety or nutritional safety or nuclear safety or whatever, right? You know, you generally want to have some sort of repeatability and reliability. So why are they unreliable, right? So the task may be ambiguous, right? LLMs themselves are non-deterministic, right? The tool may be misused, right? You might ask a tool to do something that it's not best at and it may respond and whatever. There may be a bunch of dependencies inside of there, right? So the question is can you have both? Can you have the deterministic nature of a specifically defined chain and the flexibility of a for loop that has access to tools? Well, that's kind of what LangGraph's for, right? So what is LangGraph? LangGraph balances agent control with agency, right? So when I think about LangGraph, the most important thing for me that I use is controllability. Define both explicit and implicit workflows. Because there's basically a graph or a path of a bunch of nodes and edges, I can specifically state 1, 2, 3, 4. I can basically define my functions. I don't always use LangGraph in an LLM application. A lot of times I'll use it just as in Python to deterministically order my functions, and then I can log it to OpenTelemetry, right, or LangSmith, right? But controllability is a really, really big thing. Other things that are really cool with LangGraph, and Collier has a lot of great experience on this one, is persistence, right? So then able to do human in the loop, right? And maybe you send an email out for human in the loop, and it might take 6 hours or 6 days for that response to come. Well, what if you're running in Cloud Run? It's going to go away, right? So with LangGraph, you can have persistence in different data stores, like Postgres, Redis, whatever, even file in some cases, right? We talked about human in the loop. So it allows natively built inside of it, human in the loop. So you want to pop to Slack, you want to pop to email, you want to pop to a console. It provides a nice, easy way of inside of that graph. Okay, I made a decision. Now pop to a human to get verification before it comes into the next step. And then streaming. So the ability to go ahead and expose any event or token as it occurs, right? So LangGraph works with or without LangChain. Most of the time, I don't use LangChain with LangGraph. Although with LangChain 1.0, it's basically the LangGraph React agent. So there's like the classic stuff that moved off, right? And then it integrates really easily with LangSmith. There's a LangSmith SDK. You can pop into your graphs, and you basically define your key and your endpoint, and you can set your project, and it's right up in LangSmith, and you can basically tell it to output in OTel. And if you want to output it to maybe an OTel collector and you want to fan out to a stack that you're using for elements of judge, you can do that too, right? So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff, and it's just like super simple. It's a lot easier than putting like OpenTelemetry decorators in every function and whatnot. It just kind of works. So like, again, 80% programmer, that means kind of lazy at times.
Yeah, quick question. So,
yeah.
At the top you have LangGraph application box, agent control, agency. So does that coincide with step C being that you have human in the loop to facilitate human guidance, which I would foresee as a means to protect against unwanted responses?
Well, I mean, you can use human loop for a number of reasons. Like one of the use cases I'm building right now for my ERP system, right? So like I'm using LangGraph to do LangGraph in conjunction with like, I have 4 different image processing engines that are coming in to process like stamped bill of ladings when like product comes off, comes into warehouse, right? And in this case, that processing node may move forward into a node that releases an invoice, right? Where I'm going to go ahead and basically accept financial responsibility for a certain amount of product loss. And I may want to do a human review at that point, right? Because it's my money, right? Literally, it's my money, co-founder. Scary at times. Those are things, but it may also be convenience in that you maybe you're in, like in this case, like I'm using like PyTesseract and Cloud Image API and a couple other things, like Google's OCR thing sucks. But in this case, you may want to go and do validation that the output actually matched it. You might want to have a human doing it. That's just like one case for me right now. But there's financial applications, call center ticket management applications. If you're going to think about like Jira Service Desk, right? If you're going to go back and forth, you can have that human. You can have that function replicated in your agent stacks. You can also very easily tie it into like Slack and whatnot, right? So if you want to move this to the next step, move this ticket to the next step. Maybe you have a deployment that's going on, right? And you want to go ahead and validate that the human read the CI system reports. You know, that's an example, and there are many other examples, and it's flexible is the whole point, right? So with controllability, for me, and I talked about like my use case for our nutrition facts validation, verification, creation, and our FDA label verification. People can die if you screw it up, right? And I'm legally liable as an officer in the company. And so, like, yeah, I want to make sure that it does every step every time. And I want to make sure that's logged, and actually log it to LangSmith because like it's there, right? But you know, there's many other things that you can think of. If you're doing infrastructure work, you probably want to do the same thing each time. Maybe if you're having configured Kubernetes infrastructure, same thing every time. I don't know. A lot of other things. So for controllability, you don't have to statically define each step. You can put an agent in between each step and say, okay, choose which step to use. You can branch, right? I might be getting ahead here, right? So you can basically express control flows as graphs, right? So there's this thing, this node, a start, a node, which is basically a step, an edge, right, which is the path between your nodes. You can put some LMs in the middle and use it to direct things to loop back, to have things pass forward. There's some other cool stuff that you can start to play with called middleware that you can loop onto this as well. So you can basically build these object structures into it. So the thing with where we talked about with the chain earlier of step 1, step 2, step 3, and then a agent, which is the for loop, right? Is you can have both. Is really what it is. So you can build your LangGraphs as flexible as you want, as a React loop or React agent, or as static as you want. If like an FDA, FDA certified FDA certified scenario, or maybe a supply chain or finance, right? So for controllability is also really important, right? So the LangGraph agent, right? This is basically you can basically share memory across the graph itself. So, in many ways we handle memory, right? But you can basically store state and memory in Postgres and Redis. You can, if you're using, I'll let Collier go into how you can do a deep agents. You can do things as files. If you look into, I'm not going to steal any of Collier's thunder, but there's some really, really cool stuff, and all runs on top of this graph framework, which is effectively an implementation of anyone knows what Hadoop is? Okay, I just made myself look really old. Okay, anyone know what Pregal is? Anyone know what bulk synchronous parallel is? Okay, well, bulk synchronous parallel is how Facebook computes every single like, comment, connection in the entire 4 billion person Facebook network in on 39 commodity servers in like 4 hours. Right? It's a really, really cool thing. It's one of the reasons that Harrison really blows me away, right? So you can basically you can route flow. You can route control flow based on LM decisions, right? So you have this map of where your agents can go. You use LMs to get there. So the LM LangGraph allows for a developer plus LM control flow. So you can, as I said, you can statically, you can basically make it static. You can make it kind of flexible. You can make it stupid flexible. And then you can do this thing called subgraphs, right? And this is something where I'm trying to figure out how I want to do it myself. So you can you can write a graph, throw it behind Fast API, spin it up, throw A2A on the front of it, register register an A2 endpoint with whatever your, I don't know, your service discovery, your service framework, service network is inside, and basically run AI microservices, right? You can also do a graph of graphs. And so you can basically have reusable, composable agent graphs that you can use. Kind of cool. For the controllability, you can branch. So you don't have to have a 1, 2, 3, 4. You can basically go parallel. You can also basically do MapReduce function with it. Oh, what do you know? You can basically do a MapReduce function where you can split a complex job into a bunch of small jobs and then bring that back and bring that forward and reduce that to an output to your user, giving you access to multiple cores, multiple flows. I've also seen people do, I've heard people doing like speculative decoding with it. You do a lot of really cool stuff, both here but also in middleware. The really interesting thing is it solves memory, right? So the graphs themselves, right? Think of this as a graph A, this is graph B. They basically can write and read checkpoints into a state database, Postgres. So you can also do this. There's like a hosted platform, LangSmith Cloud, that if you don't want to like fiddle with the stuff, you can. So the persistent allows for human interactions. I kind of talked about this earlier in that if you're going to do human in the loop, like if you email me, I don't know, if I'm writing code, it might get back to you at the end of the day, right? I don't know, I try to be good on email. I've been really bad recently. And I brought this up earlier. If you're using Cloud Run or any sort of, or maybe using like what AWS Lambda or whatever you do on AWS, I'm not that guy. Kevin's in the process of building one. You can basically store that state. So when that process dies, it's fine, right? The human loop comes back in, hits like the webhook. The graph comes back to life. It can pull its state out of that database, right? So it solves just real functional problems. The other thing that allows you to do is that persistence allows fault tolerance. So in this case, we saw the agent fail, right? So agent 1 split in the graph, right? Connected agent 2 and agent 3. Agent 3 failed. Because the persistence is in the database layer, you can respawn that agent, and that's fine. You don't have to write that. It's kind of cool. Also, I should actually remember if this isn't further in the further slides. Because it's a directive acyclic graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can basically move forward and move back, and so you can go back in time. So if you're trying to figure out like what the heck happened, you can do replay. So we talk about human in the loop. So you can put breakpoints within your code. So step 1, between step 1 and 2, I need a human to approve it. You can break it in the email, console, terminal, Slack, Discord, all sorts of cool things. And it supports streaming, which is kind of cool, right? So we might use that, in our applications. So how does LangGraph fit within the LangChain ecosystem? So LangChain itself is it's basically the React agent out of LangGraph now. All the old LangChain code is like in LangChain legacy, right? So basically, this makes it really easy to prototype up a React application or an AI agent. You can use it for whatever you want. I use it. It's okay. It works. There's people who argue endlessly about whatever framework is the best. Everyone can have their opinion. You can run them all inside LangGraph. So, but LangChain is 15 million monthly downloads, 100K apps that are delivered in production. There's a lot of large production enterprise users on it, and about 3,000 contributors is open source code. LangSmith is a commercial platform that is used for logging and log management. Hey, what's up, man? Good to see you. So LangSmith, I always say this, again, I'm a user, I don't work for LangChain, but like I do consume their code. So if you use someone's open source code and you got to choose a for-pay platform for something and that open source project offers one, like makes sense to throw some coin down. That's how Harrison makes his money. He has 90 employees doing stuff, so you know we can help him out. But it works, right? It's pretty big. It's about 30,000 active monthly teams on it. And you know, I talked about my use case, right? I can easily, just with 2 lines of code, 2 lines in my env file and the LangSmith SDK, have my graphs and agents logging. It's pretty cool. In the larger ecosystem, there's the open source tools of LangGraph and LangChain and the integrations. That's mostly what we deal with here, right? And then there's like a commercial cloud if you want to like have them do stuff for you and you don't have to think about the low level stuff. And then LangSmith, which is pretty cool. And then like it still allows you, if you want to fan out to like an open source stack and you want to use whatever debugging tools you want or whatever elements of judge you want, totally supports it. So at that point, we'll open it for Q&A before we get Anu up here. Does anyone have any questions about LangGraph? So I'm learning it too. Yeah, what's up?
Is there like an accepted and solid front-end interface for setting up the graphs? Because every time I've used it, LangSmith has been good for visualizing it, but not for manipulating anything in any way. Is there anything that people use for that? That's like
I use Claude Code for that. So to repeat the question, I haven't heard, is there like a visual way of messing with the LangGraphs? I use Claude Code, which is not visual. The LangChain team just released a visual agent builder, which runs on LangGraph under the hood. It just came out last Thursday. I haven't tried it out yet. Does anyone else know? Like LangFlow is more about LangChain based. Does anyone else know of any visual LangGraph builders? Yeah. Ricky was like an N8N workflow. Well, the N8N has an MCP. You can go ahead and build it itself. So it's like you can drag it. But I don't know. Any other questions about LangGraph or whatever? Cool. Well, thank you for your time. Listen to me talk about LangGraph, and thanks to Harrison and team for kicking down community slides. I think it does. Anyways, thank you so much, Collier. I think you're right that we should do a talk on middleware. Yeah. You know, there's a few of us gotten really excited about it. I'm trying to learn it myself. Next, we're going to give it up for Paul Phelps. He's going to be presenting remotely. So there's those of us who know Paul from his time in Austin. Paul moved down to Panama and actually started an AIMUG chapter down there. There's 100 members. So we're going to give it a try. Paul, we're going to turn your audio on.